Picture waking up to a steady red and blue flashing outside your house. A unit of officers stationed at your driveway, as if you're a criminal. I stood in my pajamas with my coffee mug in hand, still in shock from the shower I just took, when I noticed it. The flashing lights, the officers, and my faithful dog Duke yapping wildly on the porch. Something was amiss, and I knew it. One of the officers moved forward, his hand on the holster, his voice firm. "We need you to come outside with your hands in sight." I panicked when he asked me if my name was Marcus Dalton, and I said yes, then was struck by the surprise. A complaint filed by the HOA that I was trespassing on my property. They were informing me I did not own the right to occupy the property that had been left to me by my grandfather. I could not believe I was hearing. "Do you have evidence this is your land?" they inquired, as if it wasn't evident enough already. This land was my ranch, my home, where generations of my family had lived. But then, out of the blue, she appeared. The one woman I had been fearing. Karen. Or better yet, Diane Wilkins, the new president of our HOA from the gated community next door. She came marching up like she was the queen of the manor, arms crossed and chin held high, saying my property was now under the jurisdiction of their HOA. She said I was breaking all kinds of rules and insisted that I be removed. It seemed like I was trapped in some sort of demented dream. And when the police informed me that I'd be held until they could check my ownership, I thought I was going to lose my mind. But before they could take it to the next level, I produced the original deed to my property, signed, sealed, and notarized. That was when everything took a turn for the better. Now, let me go back a little and introduce myself. I'm Marcus Dalton, 54 years young, a former firefighter, and I've been fighting fires for nearly all my life, not fighting with folks. After 26 years on the job, I retired early, bid adieu to the city, and returned to where I started, my 30-acre Colorado ranch. This was meant to be my quiet refuge. Clean air, a faithful dog named Duke, and coffee mornings on the porch. Life was heaven for the first few months. I restored the barn, built a greenhouse, and even had my own veggies. It was all I had ever imagined until Karen appeared. I met her for the first time at the local store. She was grumbling about parking, and I was just doing my own thing. Then, without warning, she knocked on my door one morning and insisted that I join the HOA. I informed her my land was not part of an HOA, and I had proof in the form of records. But Karen was not a pushover. She presented me with a package containing an initiation fee and a 34-page list of rules. Things went from there. My mailbox was destroyed, my Wi-Fi was shut off, and even Duke returned home injured. Nonetheless, I remained silent, thinking she would leave me alone. Karen wasn't finished, though. She began sending me bogus fines, snapping photos of my land, and telling lies about me squatting on my land. Then, the day the police arrived, I thought I was going to lose it. But when I presented them with the deed, things turned out differently. The cops verified my property, and Karen's self-satisfied grin disappeared. The police informed her that she had no right over my property, and I could remain. But that wasn't the end. Karen didn't let go that quickly. She began spreading vicious rumors that I had falsified my land deed and even attempted to persuade the HOA to file legal action against me. But I was not going to let her get the better of me. The next time there was a meeting at the HOA, I presented myself with the legal papers, the survey maps, and a notice of legal proceedings if she would not cease her interference. The room was silent, and Karen was for the first time left speechless. But naturally, this was not the end of it. 2 days after, I woke up and discovered that my field was flooded, my crops destroyed, and my property vandalized. The source of the water was a burst irrigation pipe, and the only person I could imagine doing such a thing was Karen. My thought was proven correct when I witnessed her SUV leaving my property at high speed. This time, however, I wasn't about to take it lying down. I reported the affair to the authorities, involved an environmental inspector, and began to gather evidence. I was determined to fight back, but I wasn't going to let Karen dictate how I did it. This was my property, and I was going to defend it. The wild thing was, it wasn't even the final attempt Karen would make at disrupting my serenity. But karma eventually caught up with her in ways nobody could have anticipated. Bear with me, as things are only going to get a lot more interesting. We were tracing the water pipe along the hill, 300 yards along a slender trail behind the stand of trees. That's where we discovered it. The cover to the valve box torn off, the pressure release turned open, and a lone red bracelet bead in the ground. I picked it up and knew it at once. It was Karen's. She wore those red crystal bracelets like they were her jewelry. 5 different ones, all turned weekly, always flashy and coordinated with her clothes. I had witnessed her in one just like it. Todd whistled, obviously getting the seriousness of the situation. "Want me to report an environmental violation?" he asked. I nodded. "Go for it. And take pictures." We photographed, GPSed, and took a sample of the disturbed soil. It wasn't water damage, it was an attack on farm property. In Colorado, unfortunately, that was a felony offense, particularly because my property wasn't subject to HOA control. Nevertheless, I didn't attack Karen. Not yet. Rather, I rebuilt the chicken coop, this time raised on concrete blocks and flood-drenched drains. I fortified the fence and installed motion-activated trail cameras. If Karen hadn't returned, I'd catch her on camera. But Karen wasn't finished. The following week, 2 county officials appeared, stating they were investigating a health complaint made by an unknown source regarding dirty water and the disposal of animal waste. The moment they arrived on my property, Duke went berserk, but I managed to calm him down and invited the officers in. I took them through everything from the compost bin to the water filters. One of the officers, an older lady named Officer Lynn, appeared to be impressed. "This is one of the cleanest setups I've ever seen out here," she said, making notes. "Everything's compliant." I raised an eyebrow. "You think Karen sent you?" She didn't reply. 2 days passed, and I received a letter stating that no violations were discovered. Another failed effort. Karen was losing momentum, but her worst error was yet to come. I was working with the goats by the north fence one afternoon when I overheard shouting. It wasn't HOA drama, but fear. I ran up the hill and saw it. Fire. Smoke pouring out of a shed at the north edge of the Evergreen Heights boundary line. The wind was blowing it toward the tall grass on my property. Without hesitation, I took the fire hose, activated the emergency pump, and sprinted to the property line of my field. I battled the fire for more than 20 minutes until the fire department arrived. When they arrived, the flames had been cut off at my fence line. Ash-covered and dripping with sweat, I'd preserved their homes. Who came running down the hill? Karen. She froze when she saw me holding the hose. You set this fire," she screamed. "You're trying to burn us down. This is revenge." The chief of the fire department, who had just stepped in, raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, this guy just saved your whole row of houses." The fire was ignited by a grill that had been overturned on your neighbor's deck. Karen blushed, not with heat, but with shame. She attempted to protest, but the glances of everyone present left no doubt as to the way things were in the community now. That wasn't the karma, though. The next morning, Todd, the environmental inspector, showed up with a folder in his hand and a grin on his face. "You're going to love this," he said, handing me the papers. The environmental board had launched a full investigation into Karen. It later emerged not only had she meddled with the water valve, but she had illegally channeled runoff from her complex into a natural creek bed downstream, contaminating it. Worse still, the HOA did not have permits for the landscaping works Karen had approved in the border areas, involving trenching and disposal of soil waste into safeguarded zones on my side. I read the report and had a good laugh. "I can sue, huh?" Todd nodded. "You can, and you should." That afternoon, I made photocopies of the report and went directly to the Evergreen Heights Community Center, where Karen was in the midst of some ranting, attempting to whip up support against me. I entered the room, heads turning in my direction. I planted the folder on the table and just said, "I didn't torch your shed, but karma's just beginning." Karen took the folder, thumbed through it, and her face went white. The crowd was silent. One man rose to his feet and inquired, "Karen, is this true?" She remained silent. Another woman, holding the very same welcome package that Karen used to give me, shook her head. "You attempted to destroy him while keeping all this from us." Karen backed away, sending a chair crashing over. I didn't realize. There has to have been some error. But it was already done. The members of the HOA board called for an emergency meeting and required her to resign effective immediately. As she stormed out, face aflame with rage, she glared at me as if I'd ruined her kingdom. But I hadn't. She had. As I walked away, a small clap started. Then another. And another. The entire room applauded. Not because I had one, but because someone had finally stood up to the queen of HOA chaos. Just when I believed that it was all over, a legal notice came the following morning. It was not from Karen. It was from Evergreen Heights' new acting president, Rebecca Granger, who replaced Karen. The letter was official, but the message was far from cordial. The HOA had resolved to file an official boundary correction petition to annex my property into Evergreen Heights. They were attempting to legally confiscate my property. I was angry. After all of that, after saving their houses, clearing my name, and putting up with their harassment, they still wanted to take my land. I called the county clerk's office, I registered my formal objection, and started rounding up all of the evidence I'd need to defend my land. The battle was far from over, but I wasn't fighting for my land. I was fighting for my freedom. I lay awake that night. I rummaged through all the documents I had. My grandfather's original land drawings, the deed, photos, and even an affidavit in which my dad attested that the ranch had never been subdivided. The next morning, I hastened over to the county office and filed everything. Later that afternoon, I visited Rebecca. I had to confront her regarding what was going on. She told me that the board had concerns that my land's irrigation system was in jeopardy and could damage nearby properties. But I wasn't buying it. You didn't think to inform them that I saved those houses from the fire? I rebuilt the entire south fence line after the flood. She didn't respond. I stood up, my voice steady. You're just Karen in a different outfit. Undefined, her face turned red. That's not fair, she said. No, I answered. What's not fair is attempting to appropriate a man's property on the pretext of communal security. That's when Jake called. Marcus, you have to come fast. You won't believe this. I sprinted to the west side of my property, where bulldozers sent by the HOA were clearing a path directly through my land. They said it was for a walking trail expansion to benefit the community. But they had entered onto my property, and I had documentation. I called 911 and told them about active trespassing and destruction of property. The sheriff's department responded within 20 minutes and halted the operation. But the drama did not end there. The incident was featured on the local news, and my phone rang with calls from neighbors, old acquaintances, and even strangers expressing gratitude for defending myself against the HOA. But Karen had more in her arsenal. Later that afternoon, I received an anonymous email. Look at the HOA financial report. Something's hidden there. I couldn't shake the impression that someone was giving me a heads up. And what I discovered next stunned me more than anything Karen had ever done. I was about to discover the secret that would alter everything. Karen had done the HOA books alone for years. No one challenged her. Until last year, that is, when a couple of nosy neighbors began asking some hard questions. Do you still have login privileges? He chuckled. Oh, sure. They think I'm just the quiet old vet in the corner. They forget that I used to be in charge of logistics for the Navy. We sat in his study as he signed into the HOA's private member site. He navigated through tabs, general notices, bylaws, vote record, and then, after a moment of deliberation, the budget reports. He scrolled down to the most recent file, titled Quarterly Expense Summary, Evergreen Heights HOA. I leaned in, my heart pounding. Line after line, everything seemed in order. Until one thing jumped out. Land beautification and property integration. $93,000? I grumbled, eyes opening wide. Geez, what is that? Jake clicked into the breakdown. It was general architectural consulting, survey fees, bulldozer rentals. And then, bribes. I whispered, yes, real hospitality fees under anonymous invoices. But then we reached the worst of it. Karen Wilkins, Community Expansion Consulting Services, $18,000. Jake's jaw fell. She paid herself? I sat back, seething. She was paying for her personal coup plan out of HOA funds. It wasn't harassment, it was making money. Jake scrolled down some more double billing, even a lawyer fee to a law firm owned by Karen's cousin. We copied it all. The anonymous email had been correct. This wasn't about me anymore. Karen had been sucking her community dry, using the HOA as her own piggy bank and covering herself with bylaws and false permits. And now, her own hand-picked replacement, Rebecca, was treading right in her footsteps. Let's go to the sheriff with this, Jake suggested, but I shook my head. Not yet. If we go directly to the sheriff, it remains hush-hush. No, Jake replied, his eyebrow rising. You're cooking up something, aren't you? I grinned. Oh yeah, I'm convening a town hall. The following week, with assistance from some angry Evergreen Heights residents, we held an emergency HOA meeting. We dubbed it a transparency community review session, but everyone knew what it really was about. I rented a tent, installed speakers, and printed flyers inviting residents to hear the truth about their HOA dues. The response? Enormous. More than 80 residents attended. Karen didn't come, but Rebecca did, and she looked nervous. Jake and I took our seats in the front. I took the mic. Thank you all for being here. My name is Marcus Dalton, and most of you already know about the issues I've had with this HOA. Murmurs spread throughout the crowd. I've been called a squatter, been harassed, been fined, and even had the police called on me for residing on property my grandfather once owned. But this isn't about me. It's about you. I advanced the first slide. The financial report appeared on the screen. Gasps echoed through the tent. I read them through it, line by line, highlighting every questionable charge, every fictitious contract, and particularly the payments to Karen directly under false service designations. When I showed them the invoice for Karen's cousin's law firm and the $93,000 billed for beautification, the room erupted. She was paying herself? Rebecca stuttered. I pay $1,200 in dues each quarter for this. She did not respond. She turned, picked up her folder, and left without comment. I concluded the meeting with a simple declaration. You were lied to, and somebody has got to answer for that. If we let it go at this point, it won't be me they go after. It'll be anyone who's crazy enough to challenge them. The people applauded. Some stood and moved over to shake my hand. That evening, my phone was ringing nonstop. HOA members were calling for a complete audit. Petitions were being written to dissolve the existing board. Some even volunteered to assist me in suing Karen and Rebecca personally for damages. But karma wasn't finished yet. The next morning, a sheriff's truck drove up Evergreen Boulevard. Jake called. You need to see this. I jumped in my truck and drove over. Karen's house was filled with deputies. She was standing on the porch, robe around her, hair disheveled, yelling at officers. A man in a suit from the county prosecutor's office delivered her a legal document. No, that's my money. I built this, she shouted. The officer blithely responded, Ma'am, you're charged with embezzlement, misappropriation of funds, and fraud. You'll have to go with us. Neighbors silently gathered on the sidewalk, observing the so-called HOA queen getting handcuffed on her marble steps. No one jeered. No one applauded. They just gawked. And as Karen was taken away, I finally felt the weight off my chest. But I knew this wasn't finished. A week passed and a letter came, this one from the State Property Board. My gut wrenched at reading the return address. The letter was short but penetrated deeply. My boundaries of land ownership were now up for state review based on an HOA complained about issue. They were serious now. This was no longer merely HOA harassment. Now the state was taking an interest, and Karen's fabrications were probably why they were reopening the matter. I folded the letter. No matter how I struggled, they kept pushing back, eroding my peace, my rights, my home. But I wasn't going down. Jake phoned again. Bad news? He inquired, already aware. I gave him the letter. He read it, his expression darkening. They're playing the long game. Karen might be gone, but she set the wheels in motion. I was finished playing games. The following week, I put together everything. Not only the land deed, environmental photos, and reports on the financial corruption, but old family photographs, photographs of my grandfather constructing the ranch, even a historic display about my ranch at the local society. This land was history, and I was prepared to prove it. The hearing was to be held in the county courthouse. The room was filled to capacity. Some were there for my support, some out of curiosity, and others, particularly the newer members of the HOA board, were praying I would lose. I stood strong with evidence. Slides, maps, surveys, records, and even video of bulldozers on private property. I showed them bogus invoices, pictures of Karen leading workers past the boundary lines, and the handwritten journal my dad had kept. When I had finished, the room fell silent. Miss Hollis, the lead reviewer, pushed her glasses back up onto her nose and inquired, Mr. Dalton, to confirm, you have no relationship with the HOA? None whatever, I replied firmly. Neither did my father nor my grandfather. And everything was done with no help from the HOA. 1 hour passed, and the verdict arrived. We find no evidence that the Evergreen Heights HOA exercises jurisdiction over Mr. Dalton's property. All previous claims are hereby dismissed, and a cease and desist order will be issued against any future attempts at annexation. The courtroom exploded in applause. Some of them cheered, others gasped. The HOA members who had been hoping to see me fail, they filed out silently, heads lowered. Rebecca wasn't present. I discovered later that she had resigned the day of the hearing. Cowards never stuck around to see their mess cleaned up. A week afterward, the news stories got picked up. My ranch made regional papers with titles such as "The Man Who Bested the HOA." I had a chuckle. I wasn't a hero. I was simply a man who wouldn't be bullied. But karma had one final shock. One sunny morning, repairing the west fence, a car drove into the drive. A woman I didn't know emerged. Brown hair pulled back, mid-40s, eyes full of tears. She walked slowly towards me, something wrapped in a cloth clutched in her hand. "Mr. Dalton?" she asked softly. "Yes." She held out the wrapped package. "I'm Lisa, Karen's daughter. Sorry for what she did to you. I didn't approve of any of it. But when everything went down, the arrest, the hearing, I began watching the news. I just wanted to thank you for getting back at her. Most people never were able to." She unfolded the cloth. A framed picture of my ranch from decades past was inside. "I thought that it should come back to you," she said. I grasped it with shaking hands. It was a picture of my grandfather standing in front of the original barn with Duke's great-great-grandfather at his side. Forgiveness was not expected. She breathed, but perhaps peace. "Thank you," I whispered. "This means more than you can ever know." And as she headed back to her car, I surveyed my land. The land I almost lost but never let go. It was still mine, still home, and always will be. So where are you watching from? Did this story resonate with you? Drop your city or state in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more true stories of sweet karma and the battle for what is right.